Have you ever kept a family secret for decades? I won't ask what, just curious.
You know how sometimes your brain buries something so deep that you start to think maybe it was just a bad dream or a story you told yourself to make sense of something too twisted to hold up to the light. I thought I had done that. I thought I had tucked it all away so far down that it could never claw its way back up, until the day I went to pick up my daughter from her after-school science club, walked through those glass doors like I'd done 100 times before, and saw his face. And in that exact moment, I didn't feel like a grown woman, a mother, or even a person with a handle on her life. I felt like a scared 14-year-old girl again, trapped in someone else's silence. I didn't recognize the name at first, Mr. Richardson. It was printed on the permission slip for the overnight field trip. I even rolled my eyes a little when I signed it, like, of course this guy needs 3 forms for a trip to a museum. It didn't hit me then. I mean, I never really knew his last name anyway. Back then, I only knew his first name, Tyler. Tyler, who was a senior when I was a freshman. Tyler, who threw parties when his parents were out of town. Tyler, who didn't take no for an answer. Tyler, who looked right at me that night, grinned, and told me I'd be fine. I wasn't fine. And after that night, I wasn't the same. But I never told anyone, not really. I blamed myself, like most girls do when they're young and scared, and the guy's popular enough that no one would believe her anyway. But standing in that school hallway, looking at a man in a staff badge handing out leftover juice boxes to kids who were way too young to recognize danger, it all came back. Not in some cinematic flashback. Just this sharp, cold certainty that hit me in the throat. I didn't even say anything. I just grabbed my daughter's hand, told her we were stopping for pizza, and got in the car like my heart wasn't slamming against my ribs hard enough to make me nauseous. The whole drive home, I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror. I watched the way she chatted about the group project, how excited she was to show me the little model volcano they'd made, and all I could think about was her age. 13. That same age when things started getting weird for me. When adults stopped protecting me and started looking the other way. I tried to shake it off. I told myself maybe it wasn't him. I even Googled his name that night. There are a lot of Tylers in this country. A lot of Richardsons, too. But then I found an old yearbook photo. And that's when I knew I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining things. It was him. Now, I wish I could say I calmly sat down and made a plan. That I went to the police or confronted the school. But I didn't. I froze. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling with this heavy, sick feeling in my gut, trying to convince myself it didn't mean what I thought it meant. Because here's the part that really started gnawing at me. I never told my daughter who her father was. Because I didn't know. Or maybe, deep down, I didn't want to know. I got pregnant my freshman year. Told everyone it was some guy I met over the summer. Never mentioned the party. Never talked about the bathroom upstairs with the door that didn't lock. I gave birth, raised her alone, went back to school, got a job, lived my life. But when I looked at her now, really looked, the timelines lined up too neatly for it to be coincidence. And here's the kicker. My daughter had always been advanced in science. Loved chemistry. Loved his class. Talked about how Mr. R encouraged her to speak up, how he made her believe she was smart. I never connected the dots. Because I didn't want to. But now I couldn't unsee them. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I took a hairbrush from her room when she wasn't looking. I Googled how to order a paternity test online. I followed the instructions. Sent it in. Didn't tell a soul. I told myself I was being paranoid. That it was just to get peace of mind. That it couldn't be what I was starting to suspect. But when the results came back in the mail 2 weeks later, and I opened that plain white envelope at the kitchen table while my daughter was at school, everything just stopped. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember pouring the wine. I don't even remember breaking the glass. I just remember reading that final sentence over and over until it barely even looked like words anymore. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. I sat there, shaking, with glass in my foot and blood on my palm, and a memory in my head that I had spent over a decade trying to erase. And now I couldn't. Because my daughter's favorite teacher was her father. And he had no idea I knew. Not yet. But he would. And when he found out, it wasn't going to be the way he expected. There's a kind of clarity that doesn't come with relief, doesn't come with answers, and definitely doesn't come with closure. It comes with fire. That test didn't just confirm what I already suspected deep down. It rewired something in me, like flipping a circuit breaker that had been off since I was a teenager, and suddenly I wasn't just angry, I was awake, painfully. Ferociously awake in a way that made sleep impossible and silence unbearable. I sat in my kitchen for hours, not moving, not crying, just breathing like I was waiting for the rage to boil into something solid, something I could use. I didn't tell my daughter, and I didn't tell anyone else either, because I knew that the second I made this public, the battle wouldn't be about what he did or didn't do, or about how I'd been carrying this alone for more than a decade. It would be about what I could prove. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that proof doesn't mean anything if the people in charge don't want to see it. But I did try at first. I went to the police, not the station in our district, but the 1-2 towns over where nobody knew me. I brought the test. I brought a written statement. I even brought a copy of his yearbook photo from 19 years ago just to show I wasn't making it up. The officer was polite enough, middle-aged, tired eyes, probably dealing with 5 dozen real emergencies while I tried to explain something that happened when I was a freshman at a house party in a neighborhood that doesn't even exist anymore. I saw the moment his expression changed from concerned to resigned, like he already knew the ending of the story before I finished telling it. He didn't say I was lying. He didn't dismiss me. He just told me what I already feared. The statute of limitations had passed, and unless there was a recorded confession or a recent offense, there wasn't anything the department could pursue. I left that station with my hands shaking and my teeth clenched so hard I thought I'd crack a molar. I wasn't naive. I didn't think I'd walk in and walk out with handcuffs around his wrists. But I guess part of me still hoped someone would at least act like it mattered. Like I mattered. Like the version of me from all those years ago wasn't just some footnote in a file that never even got opened. So I shifted gears. I went to the school. I scheduled a meeting with the principal, an uptight woman who smiled like she'd been trained to and offered me bottled water before I even sat down. I told her what I knew. I didn't give her the test results, not yet. I just laid out the history, the timeline, the age of my daughter, and my own background. I kept my voice calm, deliberate, rehearsed, even though everything inside me was screaming. She listened, nodded, and thanked me for coming forward. Said the school takes these matters seriously. That was the last normal conversation we had. Within 3 days, I got an email saying my daughter's class schedule had been adjusted due to logistical conflicts. 2 days after that, she came home crying because her friends were whispering about her in the hallway, asking if her mom was crazy or if she was getting Mr. or fired. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just going to be ignored. I was going to be erased. Quietly. Efficiently. Permanently. And that's when I found out who his uncle was. A friend of mine, the kind who works in payroll at the school district and knows where bodies are buried, texted me late one night after I asked if anyone had ever complained about Mr. Richardson before. She didn't send gossip. She sent a link to a school board document, buried deep in a public archive, that listed board member Walter Richardson as one of the longest-serving education officials in the county. He'd been appointed when I was still in middle school. Retired briefly. Came back in an advisory capacity. And guess what? He was the one who helped push through the new hiring guidelines that allowed certain teachers to bypass the usual background checks, especially if they were transfers from another district. I sat there staring at that name, Walter Richardson, and I swear I felt the floor tilt under me. Everything made sense. Why nobody wanted to get involved. Why the school wouldn't touch him. Why my daughter was suddenly being isolated, like she was the one who'd done something wrong. Because she wasn't just a student. She was evidence. And I was a liability. They wanted me quiet. They wanted me compliant. And if that didn't work, they'd smear me just enough to make sure no one believed a word I said. So I did the only thing that made sense at the time. I quit my job. I told my boss I needed time to focus on my daughter, and she was sweet about it, hugged me, and said she understood. I didn't tell her that I wasn't just walking away from work. I was clearing my schedule for war. Because the courts had failed me. The school was covering for him. And his uncle had rigged the system like it was some family inheritance. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew I couldn't keep living like I had no power. So I burned it all down, my routine, my job, my comfort. And I started over, quietly, deliberately, with one goal, to make sure that no one, not the teacher, not the school, not the board, could pretend I didn't exist. Because I wasn't going to beg for justice anymore. I was going to force them to listen. When people think about revenge, they picture fireworks, courtroom showdowns, cameras, maybe a dramatic confrontation in a parking lot, the kind of thing that would go viral if someone recorded it just right. But the kind of revenge that actually changes something, the kind that makes people squirm in their expensive chairs and reach for their damage control teams, doesn't start with fireworks. It starts with silence. It starts with people underestimating you so deeply that they stop paying attention to what you're doing right under their noses. And that's exactly what I was counting on. After quitting my job, I waited 3 weeks before applying for anything. I needed people to think I was grieving, sulking, spiraling, anything but planning. I let the noise around my daughter's class transfer die down. I played the game. I baked cookies for her new teacher. I smiled at the other parents like nothing was wrong. I went to a couple of school board meetings and nodded along like I was there just to learn. All of it was bait. I needed them to believe I'd given up, that I was just another exhausted mom letting the system chew me up. Then I applied for the janitorial position. Not even full-time. Just evening hours, twice a week. They didn't blink. No red flags. No resistance. Just a short interview, a background check, and a set of keys handed over by a man who didn't even look me in the eye. I knew the budget was tight. They needed help keeping the school clean after COVID protocols stretched staff thin, and they'd take what they could get. I didn't care about the money. I wanted access. On my first shift, I cleaned the staff lounge while 3 teachers sat 2 rooms over, gossiping about the new math curriculum and someone's affair that apparently wasn't as secret as she thought. I scrubbed toilets, wiped down whiteboards, emptied trash cans full of half-eaten granola bars, and discarded notes. I kept my headphones in with no music playing, letting everyone think I wasn't listening. But I was. Always. It didn't take long to figure out who liked Tyler and who didn't. There was one teacher's aide, Melissa, who spoke about him like she was chewing something bitter. One night, she walked past me while I was sweeping the gym floor and muttered, "He's not half as charming as he thinks." I said nothing, just raised my eyebrows slightly, like I was curious, but too polite to pry. She paused, then added, "Especially not with the 8th graders," and kept walking. That sentence haunted me for days. I didn't know what she meant exactly, but I knew it wasn't nothing. So I kept watching. I noticed the way he hovered just a little too long when talking to certain students. The way his voice shifted when he praised the girls who laughed at his jokes. The way other staff rolled their eyes when he entered a room but never said anything. He was careful, calculated, the kind of man who had learned long ago how to blend just enough charm with just enough distance to avoid real scrutiny. I started documenting everything. At first, it was small dates, times, snippets of overheard conversations. Then it became more detailed. I created a spreadsheet on a flash drive I kept in my glove box, hidden inside a broken CD case. I backed everything up twice, encrypted it, labeled files with codes only I would recognize. I wasn't just gathering dirt on Tyler. I was mapping out a system, a culture that protected him, enabled him, maybe even quietly knew about him, but chose to do nothing because it was easier. Then I found the letter. It was a Thursday night. I was cleaning out a stack of recycling left behind in the back hallway behind the science labs, where his classroom was, when I noticed a crumpled manila folder stuffed inside a box marked to shred. The folder was empty except for one sheet of paper, folded in thirds, handwritten. I unfolded it. It wasn't addressed. It wasn't signed. But the handwriting matched his. I recognized it from a thank you note he'd once sent my daughter's class for their fundraiser. The letter was written to a girl, no name, just you, and it was disturbing in the way it tiptoed around the line between affection and control. Phrases like, "You're not like the others," and "I feel like I can be myself around you," and "Don't let them tell you what's appropriate, they just don't understand real connection." I read it 3 times, my hands shaking more each time. It wasn't enough to be criminal. Not in a court. But it was enough to make me sick. I made a copy, scanned it with my phone, and stored it in a hidden folder with the rest. I didn't take the original. That would have tipped my hand. Instead, I slid it back exactly where I found it and marked the folder with a small, barely visible dot using my daughter's old glitter pen. If it disappeared later, I'd know. After that, I started asking quiet questions. I'd casually mention during PTA meetings that I was new to school policies, then sit back and listen as the other moms vented. I learned about an incident from 2 years ago where a student's parent had requested her daughter be moved out of Mr. Richardson's class, no reason filed, just a personality conflict. But that student transferred schools 6 months later. I started to realize I wasn't the first to feel this way. I might not even be the first to know. But I was going to be the first to do something about it, something they couldn't sweep under a rug or explain away with policy language. Something loud. Something public. Something that couldn't be undone once it started. I wasn't just building a case. I was building a fuse. And I had just decided exactly where to light the match. There's a strange kind of power in knowing things you're not supposed to know, especially when everyone around you has been walking through life assuming you're either too tired, too distracted, or too small to matter, and that's exactly what I needed them to keep believing. Because the more invisible I became in that school, the more information I gathered, and the more I realized that this wasn't just about Tyler, or about what he did to me, or even about my daughter. This was about a system built to protect itself from people like me, from mothers who ask questions, from women who remember things they weren't supposed to survive. I spent a month cataloging everything, every suggestive comment he made that was overheard by someone and brushed off, every transfer request that conveniently lacked an explanation, every offhand remark from a staff member that hinted at discomfort but never turned into a report. I printed screenshots, recorded anonymous voice memos from staff who didn't want to be named, and even found a handful of parents willing to share stories that, while seemingly harmless on their own, built a very clear pattern once stitched together in a single timeline. Most of them didn't want to go public, and I didn't blame them. Who wants to be the parent who starts a war with a school board full of handshakes and golf buddies? I backed it all up onto a flash drive, not just one, but 5 identical copies, color-coded and stored in 5 different places. One in my purse. One at my sister's house. One buried under a loose tile in my bathroom. One sent to a P.O. box registered under a fake name. And one mailed anonymously to a journalist I found who specialized in educational misconduct cases, someone I'd been watching online for months, and who had a reputation for burning things down with facts and footnotes. I didn't care if he ever responded. I just needed insurance. If I disappeared, metaphorically or otherwise, the story wouldn't. But the real move was local. It had to be loud enough to wake up the people in the room who had been asleep by choice. So I set my sights on the monthly PTA meeting, the one that no one really paid attention to unless there were budget cuts or new bake sale rules. I asked to speak during the open forum, and no one questioned me because, of course, I was just the nice mom who volunteered to clean glue off the cafeteria tables. I rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times. I didn't write it down because I didn't want to sound rehearsed. I needed it to feel like a gut punch, not a speech. I walked into that meeting in jeans and a sweatshirt, carrying a 3-ring binder full of documents and a tote bag that looked like it belonged to someone more concerned with carpool than confrontation. The room wasn't packed, maybe 25 people, mostly moms, a few dads, and 5 school board members, including Walter Richardson, sitting at the end of the table like he owned the floor beneath us. Tyler wasn't there, of course. Teachers usually didn't attend unless they had to. But it didn't matter. This wasn't for him. This was for them. When they called my name, I stood up, walked to the microphone, and for a moment, I could feel every nerve in my body trying to pull me back into my seat. But then I looked over and saw 2 girls in the front row, no older than my daughter, doodling on the agenda sheet, laughing quietly, completely unaware of how close they were to someone like Tyler. That was enough. I started by saying I was concerned about teacher conduct. That got a few heads to turn. Then I mentioned patterns of behavior that had been reported and ignored. I could see Walter shift in his seat. I pulled out one of the documents, a quote from the letter I had found in the recycle bin, and read it aloud. I didn't name Tyler. I didn't have to. Everyone knew. There was a moment, right after I finished reading, when the room went completely still, like the air had been sucked out of it. No coughing. No whispering. Just silence. Then Walter spoke. He tried to shut me down, told me this wasn't the appropriate forum, that personal grievances should be directed through proper channels, and that spreading unverified rumors could be considered defamatory. I didn't flinch. I pulled out the school's own handbook, the one that stated clearly that any parent may raise issues related to student safety in an open session, and that any attempt to silence such concerns could be grounds for a formal complaint. I had highlighted it in yellow. I read it aloud. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't lose control. I just stood there and spoke calmly, slowly, with the kind of certainty that can only come from knowing the truth and having the receipts to back it up. I ended by saying that while I knew this wouldn't be resolved tonight, the people in that room were now responsible for what they knew, and that pretending not to see it wouldn't protect them anymore. I sat down. No applause. No arguments. Just stunned, uncomfortable quiet. By the next morning, the video was online. Someone had recorded the whole thing, I still don't know who, and it spread faster than I ever imagined. Not viral like celebrity drama, but fast enough that I had 3 voicemails from other schools in the district asking for copies of the flash drive. Parents were forwarding it to each other. Teachers were whispering in hallways. The superintendent issued a vague statement about investigations. But the real headline came the day after that, when Tyler Richardson was placed on administrative leave pending review. And Walter? He released a statement the following afternoon, citing health concerns and announcing his retirement from the board, effective immediately. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just took a long breath and finally let myself feel something close to satisfaction, not because it was over, but because it had finally, truly, undeniably begun. And yet, in the middle of all that noise, all that fallout, all that long overdue accountability, something else cracked quietly right under my feet. Because my daughter had seen it. And nothing I said could unshow her what I'd just done. There's a difference between winning and surviving. One of them gives you the high, the celebration, the moment where everyone claps and nods and tells you they always believed in you, and the other one just leaves you standing there alone, looking at the wreckage of what you had to do to make people finally listen, wondering if anything that's left is still worth holding on to, because yes, the teacher was gone, and yes, his uncle had been pushed off the board so fast it made the district's PR team scramble for weeks, but the truth is, none of it felt like justice when my daughter stopped speaking to me. It didn't happen all at once, and it wasn't explosive or theatrical. It was colder than that, quieter than that, like a faucet slowly being turned off drip by drip until there was nothing left but silence. The day the video went viral, she didn't come home with questions or accusations. She walked through the front door, dropped her backpack like it weighed 100 pounds, looked at me once without saying a word, and then went straight to her room. I knocked after an hour. No answer. I left her dinner on the table and told myself she just needed time to process, that I'd done this for her, that the ugly truth was still better than a beautiful lie. But the next morning, she barely looked at me. The day after that, she was gone before I woke up. And by Friday, she was staying with my sister. I could feel the distance growing faster than I could explain it, and every attempt I made to reach out felt like I was talking through glass. I tried to sit her down and walk her through everything, how I never told her who her father was because I didn't know for sure, how I thought I was protecting her by keeping it buried, how I'd only started connecting the dots once she started talking about him so glowingly, so innocently, like she was describing a mentor instead of a predator. But the more I spoke, the more her expression hardened, and I'll never forget the look on her face when she finally did speak, not because it was loud or angry, but because it was so calm and cutting, like she had aged 10 years in the span of a week. You should have told me. I deserve to know who I am, even if it was horrible. And she was right. Of course she was right. I had spent years trying to shield her from the truth, thinking I was doing the noble thing, thinking I was sparing her from something she wasn't ready to handle. But what I had really done was build her identity on a lie, and when that lie cracked open in public, it didn't just shatter her trust in the man she thought was a good teacher, it shattered her trust in me. And I don't know that I'll ever fully earn that back. People think the hardest part of revenge is the execution, pulling it off without getting caught, outsmarting the people who think they're untouchable. But the real cost comes after, when the adrenaline fades and the noise dies down and you're left alone with the fallout, trying to pick up the pieces without even knowing what the original shape looked like anymore. In the weeks that followed, I got letters. Some from other parents, thanking me for speaking up, for putting myself on the line when others were too scared. Some from anonymous emails, accusing me of destroying a man's career over something that happened 20 years ago, telling me I should be ashamed. One woman, a former teacher who had left the district years earlier, sent me a note that simply said, "I wish I had been braver when it was my turn." I read that one over and over. I kept it. The others I burned. I didn't return to the school. I didn't answer the local news when they called. I didn't want the attention, the noise, or the half-hearted praise from people who only started caring when it was too late. I just wanted one thing, to hear from my daughter. And for weeks I didn't. Then, one Sunday afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was folding laundry, and I saw her name flash on the screen. Just a text. 5 words. "I saw what you did." There was no punctuation. No follow-up. Just that. And I sat down on the floor, holding my phone, reading it over and over like it might morph into something else if I stared long enough. I didn't respond. I didn't want to push. I didn't want to misread it. Because I didn't know if it meant she was proud. Or broken. Or both. All I knew is that she knew. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step towards something we could rebuild. Not the same as before, never the same, but maybe something new, something honest, something earned. I haven't told anyone the full story. Not even my sister. Not the reporter who's still chasing interviews. Not the lawyer who offered to help me pursue damages. I don't want money. I don't want headlines. I just want it known. That man thought he could erase me. He thought if he smiled enough, if he taught long enough, if he stayed close to the power long enough, the past would stay buried. But I made sure the whole damn town remembered. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted the truth to be louder than the lie. And now it is.